It's very nice to be with you all tonight, and fingers crossed that our power holds out here. We did flicker a couple times, but so far so good. So I'm going to start today with what I call salads in jars. It's a really simple concept of just kind of building our salad in a jar, which helps it stay airtight and helps it stay fresh for several days, close to a week, and maybe, a full week, depending on how well you have it all packed in here. And the idea of this is, as we're trying to think about new ways that we can have kind of a healthy focus in the new year, it's a nice idea to try to have some healthy food waiting for you so that when it's time to have a meal, this makes a perfect lunch or a main dish salad for dinner even. You've got things handy, and by having things in your environment that will satisfy, be nice and nourishing and satisfying, and that you've got within reach, that's going to make the choices that much easier to be sustainable. So I always recommend, Michelle and I both love building salads in jars, and it's just a great way because when you're hungry, a lot of times building a salad seems like a lot of work, but if you do it all at once, and it's really not a lot of work, of course, but if we're really hungry, we may not feel like taking the time to start chopping up vegetables. So it's nice to have a few waiting for you. And this is where this comes in. So what I'm going to also say about this is you can think of this idea as kind of a template. So you can add and subtract your favorite vegetables, build the jar as large as you like if you're making perhaps a salad for multiple people in your family, or maybe your appetite is smaller and you only want half this size, whatever works for you. But I'm going to show you it in a 1 quart jar, and I'm going to build 2 of them. Although usually, and I do this for clients as well who want me to make salads for them for their week, I would make multiple. So I'd make 4 or 6, depending on how many we needed. But I'm going to just build them based on, you watching what I'm doing, making 2 of them today. So I'm taking some shredded romaine lettuce. This is organic lettuce. I try to get organic when I can. If your budget allows, I think it's a nice splurge. If not, then just make the best choice that works for you. And I do like to get different kinds of lettuces at different times. What I have done, of course, here is washed it, although I really believe in buying them pre-washed if that makes life easier for you. I do like to just give it a sort of a rough chop because I like the texture when we've got when it's kind of a little more bite-sized. But if you like it larger, you can certainly do that. So I have more than I need here today because I'm only building 2. I like to use different kinds of lettuces different weeks. Sometimes I'll add baby spinach or baby kale or power greens, sometimes radicchio. I just love what radicchio does because it's kind of a bitter lettuce that is reddish and it adds a lot of lovely color. But today, instead of that, I'm using beautiful purple cabbage, which I've just sliced to have ready. And it's kind of fun to get this ready so that when it's time to build these salads, all you have to do is pack everything in. The idea behind this is that we're trying to get as much air out of this as possible, which will help it stay fresh longer. So I'm adding a little layer of this lovely red cabbage. And part of what's wonderful about this is we should try to get a little cruciferous vegetables in our diet daily if we're able to. So I'm getting that started now already. It's nice and colorful. To that, I'm adding some carrots. And as a shortcut, I'm using the pre-shredded ones, but you can slice or dice your carrots any way you like. So now we've got a nice contrast of color, and the color is just makes it so much more appealing as you pull this out of the refrigerator. You know what I forgot to do when I usually do this? I meant to say this. In the recipe that I've shared with you, I start very often by having a little bit of salad dressing at the bottom. And often I'll just use vinegar. I actually have a couple different kinds of California balsamic here that I like to mix and match. You can use any kind of balsamic you like, or a lovely salad dressing of a different sort, depending on what works for you. I don't always add salad dressing to it because I'm going to eat this at home. I can add dressing that I may have handy in another jar. But if you're taking this with you to work, you want it to be nice and portable. So having the dressing at the bottom will make it all ready to just pour into a bowl and enjoy. So now I'm going to just add to this. Let's see what will we do next. I'm going to add some quinoa, and the idea of this is kind of turning it into a main dish salad because this is a grain. It's not actually a grain. Michelle will tell you what it actually is, but this is we think of it as a grain. But we are adding this because it has a lot of protein and fiber, and it makes this sort of feel much more like a main dish once we've got a little grain in here. It's just a lovely addition. You could add brown rice, you could add sweet potatoes. There's no right or wrong here. You really and truly can customize this any way you like. So you're just kind of building, there's no measuring required. The next step that I like to do is add some beans if I have that handy, although I wouldn't need to, but again, that's just making it a little more hearty. I actually cooked these beans 2 nights ago. And so this is a spicy bean mixture, but you could definitely use something straight from the can instead. And this is my smoky spiced beans. And we made this together a couple of nights ago. So I'm just adding some beans on top of that quinoa, again, making it one step heartier. And then I'm going to add some cucumber. And you could add, some tomatoes if you wanted to that were diced up, or some avocado, or some beets. There's really, truly, just an endless array of what you might like to include here. So I've got just a little bit more room, and I'm going to just stuff a little bit more lettuce in before I top it off. So, because I want it to be able to be really nice and packed before I add my garnishes. So we'll just add a little more here. There we go. We want it to be really just all the way to the top. And then I'm going to add a little bit of walnuts. You could add pistachios or pine nuts or pecans, but this adds a little bit of extra omega-3 for us. And then I'm topping it with some raisins. You could put some currants, or you could leave this off. My daughter doesn't like dried fruit, but some people do. And I like how it adds a little extra sweetness. And here we are. We've got these beautiful salads that are ready to top off. You can create any kind of color combination you like. And I'm just going to put the top on, and I will refrigerate this, and it'll be all ready for a meal tomorrow. Michelle?
All right, looks good. And it's quinoa's a seed, but it acts like a grain. So
seed. There you go. Thank you.
All right. So we're kind of nice to be here, by the way, everybody. We're kind of working with templates today. I'm going to be showing you a green smoothie that I'm making a certain way that I make every day. I have for a long time, but it's just to give you an idea that you choose about 1 or 2 cups of the leafy green of your choice. It's really good to just pick the ones that you'll eat, that you like and will eat, not necessarily what you think is the highest and whatever antioxidants or anything. So you can use like kale, Swiss chard. I'm using baby spinach, whatever you want for vegetables. 1 to 2 cups fresh or frozen of fruit. I love wild blueberries. Blueberries are very high in antioxidants, but wild blueberries are much higher still. So I will do that. Sometimes I'll put in like maybe a handful of frozen strawberries. With strawberries, I do like to get organic because the seeds are on the outside and they hold the most of the pesticides in that. So they're usually #1 on the environmental working group's dirty dozen. But they're also the strawberries are really good for you, but you can use any kind of fruit that you like. Protein, and a lot of people might balk because you get a lot of protein on a plant-based diet, but there's some trending towards when you get older. And one of my coworkers is a dietitian, and she defines older as 50, which is younger than I would like to think. But anyway, you can put like hemp seeds. You can use a protein powder, tofu, beans, whatever you like. It's gonna soy milk is going to count as the liquid and the protein. So you can do that. Fat and fiber, flax, meal, chia seeds, those are high in the omega-3s, walnuts, avocado, nut butters. You can use any of those, and boosters are optional, but things like turmeric, which I use, and you want to add a little bit of black pepper. You don't need a lot, but that's going to help you get more of the benefits of the turmeric. Cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla extract. You can put a medjool date if it's not sweet enough for you. Ginger, cayenne, cacao, minced, whatever, a liquid, 1 to 2 cups. You can use water, you can use almond milk, any kind of plant milk, ideally unsweetened, but if you're just starting out and you need that sweetness and can wean away from it, perfect. So this is the one I've been making for a long time, and I'm using soy milk tonight, so that's going to count for both. I've got a cup of wild blueberries, a little over a cup of baby spinach, bit of banana in for my other fruit. Usually I can't do this without my dogs running in. They think they are entitled to bananas. I think they're entitled to about everything. Okay. And then I'm going to put a ½ teaspoon in of turmeric. It's anti-inflammatory. It's got a lot of wonderful qualities. You don't taste the pepper. It might seem like you're putting pepper in a smoothie, but you don't taste it. It's just a little tiny bit like that. I put around a teaspoon of chia. This is also going to thicken the smoothie a bit. Oops. So trying to hide out here. Get in there. And then I do a rounded tablespoon of cacao. Now the cacao is, it's got very little fat in it. It has a lot of flavor, and it is one of the foods, like the blueberries too. It helps the innermost lining of our arteries. So it helps relax them, open it up, and get more blood flow. So those are very good things to do for your heart. I'm just going to put the lid on. You can just mix and match whatever kind of fruits you like. And greens, it's a great way to get your greens in without really tasting them too. And I drink mine out of a mason jar. Vicki and I love our mason jars. It's a 20-ounce one, I think, 24. I love the color. Oh, and that didn't get the that doesn't usually happen. I'll have to pop that back in afterwards. Scrape that down. Now, some people don't approve or really advocate having smoothies. They think, you shouldn't drink your calories. But for a lot of people, smoothies are just so easy to have in the morning. The thing is not to chug them down fast. You want to try to eat them slowly or drink them slowly, like you are eating the foods. Because you can see, like when you put them in the blender, it's going to make it a lot smaller volume. So you really are getting a lot of food in here. But if you have, if you need to help a little bit more help slowing down, you can just put this in a bowl. You can make a smoothie bowl, add in some of the fresh fruits, so like sliced bananas, fresh blueberries, little granola or coconut flakes, and eat it out of a bowl to slow you down. But this very easy. So you've got 2 meals super quick. They're ready for you. So back to you, Vicki.
Thank you. So the next thing we're making is kind of homemade version of a healthy pizza. And I think, because pizza is one of many of us, our favorite foods, it's a fun thing to make at home. And there's so much variety that you can build onto these pizzas. So the idea is we're starting with some kind of bread layer. And today I'm using whole wheat pita bread. I just got these at Trader Joe's. They're the bigger size. You can get the smaller personal size, a little bit smaller. Not that this is huge, but it's a little bit bigger. I also often will use a tortilla made by Ezekiel, the Food for Life brand, which you can find in a lot of times in the freezer section or refrigerated section of your health food store or even Kroger. But today I'm using this. You could use an English muffin or an Ezekiel English muffin or even a bagel, whatever kind of plant-based base you like. And we're just using this as basically a thin crust, flatbread tortilla type of version for our base. So I'm starting with that. And then our next step is to build it a sauce. We can use anything that's easy. You can use pizza sauce from a can. You can use tomato sauce. You can use a jar, part of a jar of pasta sauce, or you can use a homemade sauce. I actually made a homemade sauce that is on my website. It's a bolognese, and it has lentils in it along with some other vegetables. So we've got some onions and garlic and peppers and zucchini in here. And so when it all kind of blends together with those lentils, it gets nice and thick. It's got a little wine in here, which you could leave out if you didn't want to have any of that baked into here. But we're just spreading some sauce of your choice and as our base. So we've got this on top of our bread, and you can make it as heavy or as thin as you like. I'm leaving just a little border for an edge so you'll be able to kind of hold it. So my next step is roasted vegetables. If you want to skip that step and use something fresh, you can do that. No reason why it's got to be cooked. I just kind of like the flavor of roasted vegetables best. So what I actually did earlier in the day was take a roasting pan, and cut up an onion, a red pepper, and a zucchini into a small dice. And I put it into the oven until it got all kind of caramelized. I added a splash of water a couple of times and just a little bit of salt and pepper. And I ended up with a pan full of roasted vegetables in a very diced form. So to me, that makes a perfect topping for a pizza. Now, since we're not using cheese, because we're talking about a non-dairy plant-based pizza here, you could use a non-dairy cheese. There's lots of them out there, but I'm building this without that. And the reason that I'm doing that is this is how I like it best, but you could certainly do whatever you like. What I figured out quite a long time ago, because I used to be kind of a cheeseaholic before I turned vegan, which I did over 10 years ago. But originally I found it kind of difficult to give up cheese. No longer do I feel that way. I would never want to eat cheese anymore. But I will say that the secret to making your own pizza is lots and lots of flavor when you don't use cheese. So I like to pile it up nice and thick. And so now I took a fresh pineapple, and I'm adding lots of fresh pineapple. I know people come down in different corners about pineapple on pizza, but I absolutely love it. I love that sweet and the savory together. So I'm building it up nice and high. You could add fresh basil, which I love to do. I don't have any fresh basil today, but sometimes I add Italian seasoning. You could add red pepper flakes. And so now I've got this nice and tall, and I'm going to bake this in a toaster oven for about 12 minutes. And I'll show you what it looks like because I just put one on before we started. Let's see if this pan is too hot to touch. Grab a towel. And here we are with our pizza, steaming hot, covered with lots of goodies, and ready to enjoy. Michelle?
To me. All right. So the next thing I'm doing, another kind of template, is just a wrap. You can use tortillas, collards, romaine leaves as a boat, any kind of flour tortilla, really flexible flatbread, or if you're gluten-free like I am, gluten-free tortilla that might be really expensive and very lacking in pliability. So I was going to do a collard green today. I think they're really nice, and I have the directions on how to use them for wraps. There weren't any good ones yesterday. They were either really small or large with a lot of tears in them. So I bought some of the gluten-free tortillas. They're Siete. It's a nice brand, nice family with a lot of allergies, so they make a lot of products. It's not going to wrap as nicely as a flour tortilla. So usually you need to warm it up a little bit to make it more pliable. So you can put whatever you want. You can buy chopped vegetables. I think Nikki mentioned that she used the shredded carrots she bought shredded carrots for her thing. I've got a shredding disc on my food processor, so I shredded some for that. But you can easily, if you're thinking you want red cabbage, but you think I'm never going to use the whole thing, or you don't know how to cut it up, you can buy a bag of shredded cabbage very easily. So you can use a cucumber, shredded carrots, tomatoes, whatever vegetables you like and will eat. And that's the bigger thing, is that we don't want perfection to be the enemy of good. We want to have foods that you'll eat, that you'll enjoy. You can put avocados, microgreens, sprouts. I had no luck with avocados yesterday. They were like baseballs for softness. So not having any of that today, but you can use any kind of bean dip, hummus, white bean, black bean, whatever you like. And I'm going to show you how to make a beet hummus. It's lemony beet hummus. I made this because I hated beets, and I thought I was the only one that hated them. I just hated them. When I was a kid, I thought I was getting cranberry jelly, and it wasn't. And I was at school, and you had to pick how much you wanted, small, medium, large. And I went, oh, cranberry jelly. I picked large, and I hated it immediately. And they wouldn't let me leave until I finished it. So I did all the little kid things, plug nose, wine, all that, but I still had to sit there until I finished it. So I hated beets for years. And then I found out how good they are for us. And I didn't want that school experience to keep me from having them. So, but I found in the meantime that a lot of other people hate them too. They're very earthy flavor. So to combat that, using herbs and a lot of lemon juice, lemon zest, it really brightens it up and counters that somewhat. So that's what I'm going to start. And where did I put the lid? Great. I always do something like this. Where did I put it? Excuse me. Yeah, okay. Human. All right. I washed it from earlier. So what I like to do when there's something that calls for minced garlic, I like to drop it in the chute while the machine's running, and it'll mince it for me. Just easy. And then the rest is just dropping it all in. So I've got a can of chickpeas that I drained and rinsed. I saved a couple tablespoons of the liquid, which is just bean water, but we call it aquafaba. And I put that in. I've got lemon juice, a lot of lemon juice, and the zest, quarter teaspoon or half teaspoon of lemon zest. And it's a good idea when you're doing this. I do recommend you're going to use the zest of something to consider organic, because you are eating that outside where the pesticides were. So I've got half teaspoon each of cumin and coriander, some salt and pepper. And I've got the beets. And when you're doing these, I always roast them with the skin on. They're a lot easier to peel that way. But when you're handling them, I just recommend using something that you don't want to wear out in public, because beets stain. They really do. And they seem to know when you're wearing something special. So I've got a couple tablespoons of tahini, which is just ground sesame paste, ground sesames. Sesames do help you absorb more of the nutrients, especially the fat soluble ones. Okay. Mix them in. Gotta scrape the sides down. Nice vibrant pink. I love this color. And I also want to say, you can buy, if you don't want to roast them, you can buy steamed. They still sell those at Trader Joe's or other places where you can just buy them already cooked. Won't be quite as pink. The roasting makes them a little more vibrant. And I just turned on, I've got a gas stove, and I just turned one of the burners on so I can just soften about 15 so seconds on each side, just to soften it a little bit. a little bit of the beet hummus. You can see that color. These are small tortillas. So I'm going to probably would have a couple of these, but the large tortillas that they have there by this company are $12. So you don't really want to spend that much money. Then you can use, so if I'm not using the collard greens, I just use a salad mix from Trader Joe's. So it's a good way to get a variety of greens into your diet. Good for the microbiome type of variety. So I'm just putting some of that on there. I've got some zucchini, a cucumber. And I just shredded up some of the red carrots too, just for a little difference in color too. You could put a grain on here, but these are so small that I'm not doing that right now. And you could put microgreens, sprouts, whatever else, some nuts. This is just so tiny. I'll just roll it up. And there you go. See that? You've got a lot of great vegetables, a lot of really powerful phytochemicals, and it's really healthy. Everything we're showing you is very healthy food. So like I said, you can use any combination that you will enjoy, and it's very simple. You have these things ready, so you can put them in the jar salads like Vicki was doing. You can use them for bowls. I'm going to show you how to make a nourish bowl later. So you have all these things ready. If you have a salad bowl, salad bar kind of prep, you can use them all different ways, like we're showing you tonight. So back to you, Vicki.
Thank you, Michelle. So next I'm making a dessert, a really healthy cookie that can be a lovely, easy snack to grab, in the afternoon with a cup of coffee, or in the evening when you want something at the end of the day, or even a breakfast cookie, really nice in a lunchbox too. I call it a PB&J oatmeal cookie. So it's really an oatmeal raisin cookie with a little peanut butter and jelly in it, but there's no sugar and no oil. So it's really, kind of a healthy version without a lot of extra ingredients. They're all things you can pronounce. So we're going to start with 3 ripe bananas that I have mashed, and I'm just going to show you it was about this ripe. You could let it get a little riper, because the riper it gets, the sweeter it will be. So this is nice for this recipe, I think. So then I'm adding 2 cups of rolled oats. That's just the standard longer cooking flat rolled oats. And then quarter cup of peanut butter, and a quarter cup with an extra tablespoon or 2, your choice, of a fruit sweetened jelly. So there's no sugar in the jelly. That becomes kind of our sweetener along with our banana. So I'm just going to get out all of this goodness, because this is adding flavor and becomes kind of the substitute for adding extra oil as well. And then I'm adding some jelly. This is a grapefruit sweetened jelly. And so there's no added sugar in here. And then I'm adding some raisins, and then a little bit of baking powder and baking soda. So you could kind of do this in any order. I would normally do all my dry ingredients first, but I kind of have everything in here in one bowl, and it smells nice and peanut buttery, but with the jelly, so it's kind of a nice, very simple recipe. And I actually developed this recipe during the, in the kind of the middle of COVID, when I was just really finding it fun to create more and more ways that we could satisfy our sweet tooth, which we definitely have in our family, but just using the pantry ingredients. So not requiring much that I didn't always have on hand. And so that's kind of where this developed, just these very simple oatmeal cookie that, has all this fiber in it with the bananas and little peanut butter that kind of helps give them some staying power, so that once you mix this batter up all in a single bowl, it's ready to bake at 350. Just looks like this. And what I'm going to do is take a baking sheet that I have covered with a silicone baking mat. If you don't have this kind of baking mat, then you can just use instead some parchment paper. And I'm just using a scoop, a standard scoop that's around 2 tablespoons. And I'm just going to fill them on the sheet pan. This is going to make roughly 20 to 24 cookies. So it takes me 2 batches to use all of this up. And you could even leave this in the refrigerator so you could bake some more fresh tomorrow. And that's the idea. I'll fill up this baking pan. I'll flatten them just a little bit because when they're flatter, I think they bake more evenly. So this is what I'll do to each of them, is just kind of flatten them out so they look like a cookie, because they aren't going to do very much moving in the oven. So we're going to just do this very simple prep. I'll add a few more before I stick it into the oven at 350 for roughly 18 to 20 minutes or so, and just until they get to be the texture you like. And then I baked some earlier today so that you could kind of see what they're like. And they end up, I'm going to just come a little closer to the camera to show you. We've got this whole container full. I keep these in the refrigerator. These also freeze nicely. And they're a very chewy, soft cookie. You can see, you can kind of bend it and, you know, nice and chewy and full of flavor. So that is our oatmeal raisin peanut butter and jelly cookie. Michelle?
All right, and the last thing I'm going to show you is how to make a nourish bowl, which is like a Buddha bowl, just another name for it. This is also from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So you have a template here in the recipes. So 2 to 3 handfuls of greens. You can have them raw or lightly cooked. I'm using steamed kale with garlic, and other veggies, a cup, steamed, raw or roasted. Whatever you'll have. It's nice to eat the rainbow. Like everything Vicki and I've been showing you tonight has been, you know, a lot of different colors. All the different colors have different phytochemicals, and they're just, if you don't have to know what they are, but just to know if you eat the rainbow, the reds, the greens, the yellow, orange, blue, and that you're going to get a lot more good nutrition. So protein like beans, garbanzo, I've got the chickpeas, got garbanzo, chickpeas, and chichi. They're all the same thing. Use whatever you want. You can use tofu or tempeh. Recommend that you get organic. Again, for here, if you want non-GMO. The soy is one of the highest crops for GMOs. And try to avoid those. Fiber-rich carbs, grains like the quinoa, rice, millet, farro, whatever. Sweet potatoes, squash, corn, peas. And you can also put fruits in there, and then a healthy fat. You want to limit that to 1 to 2 of these toppings: avocado, olives, nuts, seeds, hummus, whatever. So I could use the hummus that I just made, but I'm going to use a dressing that you could also use on Vicki's salad too. It's a tahini dressing. So what I have is I'm just going to put, I like to eat out of this kind of bowl for these kind of meals. Just put some kale down here. And I just, like, here's another thing. You can certainly go out and buy a bunch of kale and then take, you know, clean it and cut it into smaller pieces, or you can just buy a bag of kale that's already cut up for you. Okay, these are just roasted sweet potatoes. I try to roast a lot at the same time, so it's saves, as long as I'm heating up the oven, making the most of that space. I just heat these up on these chickpeas on the stove, and I just put some spices I didn't measure. I just put cumin and garlic, and what else did I have? Chili powder, a little cayenne, and I roasted some red onions. The rest of these. Potatoes. And I have these other carrots, so just for a little bit of crunch from the raw, I'm going to put those in. More color. Okay, and then I'm going to make the dressing. I've got 1/3 of a cup of tahini. You don't need a blender for these, but I prefer it's a little less work on my hands. Got some maple syrup. You could use agave. Agave is much sweeter, so just keep that in mind. And I've got lemon juice. And a few tablespoons of hot water. And there's a little salt and pepper on there too. And you don't have to add salt if you don't want to. I've got the clove garlic in there. Where did I put it? Here we go. Here it is. Okay. Clove garlic. And then this one. Needs a little bit more water. I had to mix about 4 times today. I think it's getting a little tired. Okay. I'm just gonna smooth this on here. I don't really like to thin that out, but just in the interest of time. Bob's on there. Smells really good. All right. This smells good. There you have it. So Nourish Boy, you can use this so you don't really, I like the idea of the templates because you don't have to have a certain thing on hand, or if you don't have it, it's really easy to use whatever you have. And you know, you can eat the same basic template every night and have totally different foods, flavor profiles. So there you have it.
Wonderful. Everything looks so delicious. Here, let me add Vicky to the spotlight so people can see you both while answering the questions. Awesome. Again, as always, everything looks delicious, and we're all jealous of the meals you guys are about to eat after we get off this Zoom call. So Vicky, first off, a couple of questions about your salads in the jars. Mostly questions about how long they stay good for. The first one was, if you add the dressing to the salad in the jar, would this cause the lettuce to go bad faster? And then someone else just asked, in general, how long do these salads usually stay good for?
So that's a great question. And there is some variability because it just depends on each of the items and the shelf life basically of each of the type of lettuce that you get. Certain things, for example, if you're using kale versus baby spinach, you'll find that it'll last a little longer. The vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers that we use that are a little more watery will maybe shorten the amount of time versus adding things that are a little more dense like carrots and cabbage and so forth. And that's an excellent question about the dressing. I would actually, if you're going to add dressing, I always recommend you start with that on the bottom and then put your densest ingredient. So that would be a great place to add your chickpeas or something like that that's not going to really do a lot of absorbing of flavor. And so then maybe put your cabbage or something like that, and then pile your more delicate vegetables on top of that. I didn't really do that today because I kind of wanted to make it look nice and pretty, but and these are going to get eaten quickly. I only made 2 of them, so they'll be gone in a day or two. But if I were going to want them to last all week long, I'm going to definitely make sure that I use something like beans at the bottom or cabbage or something that'll be a little hearty, and then put my more delicate things on top. And if I'm making this for a client, I probably would leave off the tomatoes, because those will get a little bit more watery and kind of maybe not keep it as fresh for as long. So that's what I would say. And the idea of keeping as much air, really kind of pounding down more than you think you would want to or need to, with the lettuce, to make sure that all the air is gone. That's going to help keep it fresher longer. And for some reason, this just really stays more fresh for longer in glass than it would in like one of your plastic containers or a baggie or something like that. So I do recommend this method, but you will do a little experimenting on your own to see how long it'll last in your own refrigerator. Michelle, you might want to add to that. I know you've got your avocado story with your mom.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you remember that. Okay. Yeah, I'll put them in like this size jar for me a lot. And I put the denser things. I usually start with beans at the bottom, and I will put I have these little the smaller spice jars. They work really well to just use for the dressing. They also sell they sell a lot of different containers for dressing. So I usually, whether I'm home or out, I don't put the dressing in the jar. But I made some for my mom, and I use smaller ones for her. And it had avocado. Now I do jam them in really tight, and I do like the mason jar, like something like that. I think it is even better, and a really tight fit on the lid. And I made her a bunch of them because I batched cook a ton for her. And I was at her house, and I was like, oh, what is this? There was a jar that I had made for her a week ago. She got shoved in the back of her refrigerator, and it was still good. The avocado hadn't even oxidized. So I had that on top, and it just really pressed down. So they really can last. I wouldn't, recommend doing that, but I mean, I'm just saying that they do last a long time.
Right. I wouldn't recommend it either. So it's hard to say, this will last for 5 or 7 days. I wouldn't know in your refrigerator and, how much time there was on each of the ingredients. It's going to it'll be a little different for each person probably, and even from week to week. But I do find that several days, they're definitely good for, a good 4 days for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Lots of great additional tips. Thank you both. Okay. So this next question was asked while you were demoing your smoothie, Michelle, but you might both have some thoughts on this. Someone was just wondering if chia seeds need to be ground up to obtain the health benefits, or if they don't grind them, if they should focus on chewing them as much as possible while they're eating it. If you have any thoughts on that.
I think they should be ground like flax meal to get the benefit from them. But when you can make a chia pudding or things, oh my goodness, things like that, they're going to swell up, and it is all right that way. But I always grind them. I think that's going to, as long as you're eating them, you might as well get the benefit, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Vicky, for your pizza, someone was wondering what temperature do you roast the veg for your pizza, and what do you put on the veg before roasting? Do you use any oil or season it at all, or how do you roast your veg for your pizza?
Yeah, so I actually do it at usually about 400, sometimes 425. And as Michelle and I have discussed, you can really do it at any temperature. It works. It just how long it's going to take. So I usually do 400 or so. For about 20 minutes, I look at it, add another 10 minutes as needed. And it kind of depends what you're making, of course. So the vegetables I made were all really quite tender and watery, the zucchini, peppers, and onions. But if I was doing something that involved carrots or butternut squash or something like that, cauliflower, it would take longer. Often 40, 50 minutes, sometimes even an hour, depending upon, the size of the vegetable and so forth. So I like to keep an eye on it. I usually put it into a hot oven in a nice, heavy roasting pan. And then I don't add anything at all. And I give it a stir at that 2-minute point. And I might add at that point a splash of water. And then maybe I'll season it a little bit. I often will use salt and pepper or a little Creole or Cajun seasoning, because I just like the chilies in there and the garlic. But you can kind of do nothing with it and season it at the end if you want. it kind of depends what you're going to use them for. If you're putting it into something like this where there's a lot of flavor, and if you're adding fresh herbs or things like that that are going to give it even more flavor, especially with a flavored pizza sauce underneath, you may not need a lot, but kind of feel free to adjust as you like. I do like the vegetables usually kind of seasoned. I might add them to a baked potato if I've got leftovers, not even, use them all on the pizza because they're so useful inside of Michelle's wrap, for example, or on top of a nourish bowl. Or, I mean, you'll always be happy that you've got roasted vegetables. So I do like to have those on hand, and I often will just do it at 400 without a lot of extra seasoning.
All right, sounds good. Okay, Michelle, for your hummus, someone was wondering if in a pinch, if they could use canned sliced beets for the hummus.
Give it a try. Yeah, I don't know what else is in there, but it's like, I think it'll work fine. Sure.
All right, cool.
I can say to that, and Michelle's, if I can just add this, Michelle's hummus is absolutely fabulous, and I recommend it very highly. But I will also say that I've tried something like her hummus. I have my own version kind of inspired by Michelle's, that I've tried with the pre-cooked steamed ones that you can buy in the produce section that are in a package. And they work pretty well, I will say. Not quite as delicious, but almost there. It's a nice way to kind of cut corners on time if you don't have time to roast your own. But I will say the color is beautiful. When you roast your own, you've got that beautiful, magnificent fuchsia color. When you use the one from the store that's already pre-made, I find it turns kind of a cranberry color, still pretty, but not as like flashy. So doing it on your own, it's not a lot of work. Again, you could just throw that beet that you've washed into a container that is oven safe, cover it, or you can do aluminum foil if you're not averse to that, or just put it into a casserole dish and cover it and bake for an hour at 350, and your beets are tender. So it's something you can do passively while you've got other things happening. Maybe you're watching TV or something in the evening, and you can get those ready for the week.
And I agree with everything Vicki said, because I think I mentioned too that it's just not quite this same color, and I love the vibrant color. But if you're in a hurry or it's just a little overwhelming, just baby steps, you can use the other things that are ready. But I did everything in a 400-degree oven today also, and I had the beets. I rarely use foil, but once in a while for the beets I'll do that. It's just easy. I wash them, I don't peel them, I dry them, put them in, and I had them with the in separate containers, so usually they'll bleed a little bit. But I did the onion, the sweet potato, large sweet potatoes, just to make the most of the time I had the oven heating.
I will also say on those beets that you can buy pre-made, that they are nice in a salad. So if you're just kind of assembling a bunch of things you want to pile in, where you've got a lot of other interesting textures and flavors, and the color's not quite as critical, that's a nice way to get the value of and nutritional benefits of beets, and a little new addition, flavor and texture in there. So I like to layer in beets that are already prepared when I have those as well.
Absolutely, that's a great tip. I've got to make myself this beet hummus. I'll let you guys know what I think when I do it. Sounds so good. Okay, this was again in reference to Michelle's wraps, but maybe you both have thoughts on this. Someone was just wondering if anyone or either of you have found a healthy tortilla that's slightly less expensive than the Siete brand. I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly. Someone just asked about that. And if anyone else watching has any ideas or thoughts that they use, feel free to share that in the comments as well.
I used to have, are those gluten-free or the Ezekiel?
They're not. So I don't use gluten-free, but I do use the Ezekiel tortillas. Do they make a gluten-free version, Michelle?
I don't think so, but once you get to gluten-free, they tend to make it easier. They used to sell a brown rice tortilla, and my family, we were at a restaurant, one of the many vegan restaurants that's closed, and we all had burritos. We picked them up and like clockwise, they all broke into shards and everything fell out onto the plate. So it just heating them up a little first is going to make them more pliable, but it is really difficult in my experience to find one that's going to hold up and act like. So I'll wrap it in parchment, and twist the ends to keep it from falling apart, from the time I make it to the time they're eaten. But I am working on making one. So, because I feel like I understand that, you know, small companies are doing smaller batches, but I can't spend $12 for a bag of tortillas.
Absolutely. Well, let us know if you come
That's
up
all.
with anything different.
Right, so like a romaine lettuce leaf, like a larger one, you can put it in there, the collard greens, something like that. It's nice, when you're gluten-free, you miss the bread or the easy things you can pick up to eat. So I find those are the things I use.
Trader Joe's has something called a jicama wrap, right? That is a version of a very flat, vegetable that you can fold with your goodies inside. So, and they're corn tortillas that might pass your test of what type of, depending on the ingredients you're looking for. So, there's lots of options out there. And there's even recipes where people are making their own with just lentils and water or oats and water and things like that to kind of create their own tortillas at home. So there's lots of possibilities depending on, what you're interested in.
Thank you for bringing up the jicama wraps, because I used to get those. They're really small. They're very small and they tended to get slimy fast. So I stopped buying them. I was getting those for a while. And I used to make a tortilla with you can call it that, was soaked yellow split peas and red lentils. I've seen it with just red lentils. The taste isn't quite what I want for a lot of other things. So
Agree.
yeah, but you can still make those and roll something up in them.
Absolutely. So a few different options depending on kind of what specifically you're looking for. All right. It is 7:30, but we have 2 more questions real quick before we wrap up. Someone's just wondering what you recommend for an egg substitute while baking. I know there are so many different options depending on what you're making, but I don't know if you guys have a couple of favorites you could share.
I like to use flax eggs. So that means that you're using some ground flax, keep mine in the refrigerator or in the freezer rather, with water. So like 1 tablespoon of flax to 2 or 3 tablespoons of water. Lots of people use applesauce or a non-dairy yogurt, there's lots of different things you can use in baking. But I tend to kind of move in that direction. Usually the flax kind of does the trick for me. Michelle?
I use flax eggs a lot. Before I was vegan, I still had an egg allergy and I used silken tofu, which works really well. Just don't tell people about it necessarily before they have it, because they might have an idea, but it works really well. So it kind of depends on what you're baking. And there are a lot of sources online where they'll give you how to replace eggs. I think I'm sure probably Forks Over Knives, PCRM. There are a lot of different things. You can just Google it and you'll probably find it.
Definitely. Yeah, I've definitely seen a few different kinds of charts. There's, as Vicky and Michelle said, so many different options. It just kind of depends on, because eggs serve like a few different purposes in baking. So it kind of depends on what, purpose you're trying to replace in your egg replacement. Okay, let me see. One more question. Someone just asked, for those who cannot have tree nut milk or soy milk, is there another type of dairy-free plant-based milk that you recommend?
Oat milk. And that's hearing Tom at one of the other classes. It's the lowest, it uses the least amount of water too. So it's kind of a better environmental choice too. And if you like, well, I was gonna say coconut, but that falls right back into the allergy category. So I think rice milk is what I first started with, and that is way too watery for me. I don't care for it, but that's another option.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Oat milk is definitely a great way to go and has become a lot more popular over the past few years as well. So I would say it's almost as easy to find as, soy milk or almond milk these days at most grocery stores.